All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Nonprofit Enthusiast Live. I am so excited to have Dr. Angela White Jones here with us. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
We're looking forward to the conversation. So last week we had Debbie Pedraza from the Foundation of Orange County Public Schools on with us. She was talking a lot about Giving Tuesdays, knowing our live bunts and our side bunts. And today we're going to continue the conversation with Dr. Angela White Jones on fund development and year-end planning. So before we jump into that, take a moment, invite your friends to the group. If they are not in the group, go ahead and tag them in the chat box. If you're catching us on replay, give us a hashtag replay in the chat so that we know that you are here. Give us a good morning, hey, so that we know you're here. And throughout, feel free to drop any questions that you may have. And also, I would like to give a special thanks to our this month's sponsor, who is Complex 7. Complex 7 is an online BMW parts and apparel store that provides products that combine quality performance with value pricing. Check out today's sponsor at www.complex7.com. All right, morning, Shay. Hey, Danita. Hi, Janet. I saw Danita twice last week. We actually had a training in Jacksonville. So I saw Danita in Jacksonville. And then the Blacks in Nonprofit Conference happened in Atlanta, Georgia. We just got back. I got back on Sunday. And so I saw Danita there last week. So that was absolutely amazing. Nice. Hi, Janet. And I know we actually have some new friends from the Blacks in Nonprofit that joined our group from last week. So welcome to you all as well. So let's go ahead and jump right into the conversation. Dr. Angela White Jones, thank you so much for joining us. I'm just so excited to have you here.
Thank you. Me too.
Yes. So
yes.
If you could just tell us about yourself, and how you entered your journey in the nonprofit arena.
Oh, yes. So I'm currently the director for the Research Administration Master's Program at the University of Central Florida. And I'm also a full-time faculty member in the School of Public Administration, where I also work in the Master's in Nonprofit Management program. So I do a lot of different things in the academic space. But prior to that, a lot of my work has been in nonprofits or have been consulting related to state and local governments and nonprofit work as well. So I've always been a public servant type of person and professional. It has been a wonderful, I guess I'll date myself, but maybe last 16 years or so since I've been working in the field, that it's been a joy. I got into grants actually on a whim, which I think most grant writers will say that they kind of backed into it or lucked into it. And I actually was getting my master's at The Ohio State University, and I was working at the Bureau of Early Intervention Services at that time. I was also taking a class as part of my master's on grant writing, and my job was like, hey, we need to start this program, but we need some grant dollars for it. Hey, Angela, you're taking a class, aren't you? Don't you want to help write a grant? And I'm like, I'm taking the class. I don't have any experience in it or what have you, but I did it, and I wrote it, and we were successful. And I think after that and graduating, I moved down here to Orlando, Florida, and took a job doing consulting, still with state and local governments as our major client, and then moved back into nonprofits, where I worked progressively for a few agencies here in grant writing and grant development, ultimately becoming senior director, and then going to get my doctorate and joining the UCF faculty a little bit after that. But it's been an amazing journey so far, loving working with nonprofits and with people who are trying to start a nonprofit, who are in the middle of it, who are seasoned nonprofit professionals and research admin professionals who also deal with grants and contracts. And it's just been a really excellent ride for sure.
Awesome. So you did that grant, and then what kept you in that field of like, so you did the grant, you could have stopped, you could have went
Yeah.
into any different arena, but it's like, no, I'm going to keep going. What was it?
I think that for me, originally I wanted to do strictly public policy. That was where my heart was. Even was thinking about lobbying and what have you. I think that for me, helping people who needed services, who maybe didn't have the voice or who didn't have the platform, was particularly important to me. So being able to offer any kind of services that I could to, allow for the opportunities that others maybe wouldn't be able to get otherwise was critical. And I think the turning point really was when I was working for an organization called Quest Incorporated, and they provide
Mhm.
services to those with developmental disabilities. I think seeing that those grant wins touch other people, being able to see
Mhm.
the work that you do be put into practice was something that I don't think for me, any private sector service could touch, as far as knowing that was my passion and that was something that I was meant to do. So
Mhm.
seeing the win, not just the technical win, but people
Yeah.
actually getting, those services. Actually, you're seeing the transitional housing being built. You're seeing the programs that started
Mhm.
off from someone in their mind, and then you're seeing the grant partnership form. All of that, I think, really made me say, like, this is it for me. This is what connects me to the world around me. This is how I know that my place is here and what I'm meant to do, that's greater than just me alone. So
Love it. And we in nonprofit, that's one of our favorite topics is money, money, whether it's grant, fundraising, or whichever it is. And we know how important it is, how much even number one, we could stretch the dollar. Working in
mhm.
nonprofit, we know how to stretch the dollar and make a
Yes,
great impact
yes,
with very little, but we know how much more we can do when those resources are in. So thank you for the works that you're doing. Um, so let's talk a little bit about, so this month's theme is fund development, along with the conversation of year-end planning, anyone that you choose, especially because we're getting, on that final stretch of the year, and organizations are starting to either make their final request or preparing for what next year would look like. So if we could just talk a little bit about, in the world of grants and in your world, what recommendations do you have for nonprofits tuning in?
absolutely. I think one thing about grants is that, especially now more than ever, how important strategic planning is to the grant writing process. So I think sometimes people think that grant writing is over here in its silo, and it
Hmm.
did used to be that way. We used to spend time physically writing or on the computer typing up proposals, and we're kind of just over here. And then a lot more of the like major gift officers and directors of development and the event coordinators, they were off over here and they were talking
Hmm.
to people. But now grants are a part of the pie, and they're for some agencies a significant part of the pie, and you can't plan for true quality proposal writing without a plan first. So I would
Hmm.
say year-end planning and continuous strategic planning is so important to fund development for a grant writer or for a grant team. It is going to be imperative that you figure out and that you put a schedule together of where you're going to find these funds. What are you looking for exactly? Who, if you have in your organization several different um, types of programs and services, you know, what are the priority markers, who needs what. So in the past, when I've done grant writing, I've had some agencies that have had, I would call them like the octopus or the spider, because they had, you know, legs everywhere. There were 8, 10, 12 different projects going at any given time, different ones. I had some that only had like 1 or 2. So you have to figure out, you know, where are the priority markers? What are you going to be able to concentrate on? And then devise your calendar accordingly and pay attention to those deadlines and almost reverse engineer and work backwards for your calendar so that a deadline is not running up on you, you know, 2 weeks before, prior, you know, prior to that. Oftentimes when you're writing grants, you're going to want to be able to give yourself a lot of time, not only to do the writing and the editing, but to do the preparation and the legwork, to get the data, to get the information, to speak to whoever will be actually directing the program or managing the program in your organization. There may be other requirements by the funder. They may want you to come to a pre-funding meeting that is required. And so if you miss that, then you've missed the opportunity to do so. So, you know, and engage in the funding process that year. So you always want to make sure that you develop a strategic process where you're calendaring all of your prospective grants, where you're looking, where you've developed a system of red, yellow, green, or first, second, third, or however you want to do it, that shows priority level and when you really want to pursue, or when there are matches that work for you, so that you're not also pursuing a grant that really doesn't fit very well. But the strategic planning process of grants is, I don't think, can be said enough about how important it is. As I've said in a lot of my talks and in class as well, 80%, the grant process is 80% preparation and that 20% writing. And too many times I think we get it reversed, where it's, oh, I've got to concentrate on the writing. The writing will come. The writing will, and the tone and the texture of your writing, that will be developed and that will be honed. But if you don't have that 80% preparation, you're going to be running up against timelines, deadlines. You're not going to be able to put out your best work. You're not going to be able to get that data that sets you apart from other people who are writing in that space. And so I would say really developing that strategic plan and mapping is probably your most critical idea and area when you're fund developing in grants.
Love that. So tell me, like, and I love that you share. So 80% preparation, 20% is actually writing. So here you are, you're planning out your grants for the next 12 months, you know, the ones that you know are going to open up around this time. And sometimes there's seasons where there's so many grants that's out there. How do you, with that priority, making those priorities, how do you kind of decide which ones should I really focus on?
That's a really good question. Yeah, there were always, I think, 2, maybe 3 really good seasons where there were a lot of applications that were due. For me, luckily, I did have a small team, and by small, like a team of 2 or 3 people. So if you are lucky enough to have a team, which is great, you know, you can devise a bit of the work. You can have someone who primarily is looking at just the research in and of itself. So making sure that the missions align, making sure that the timing is right, making sure that the giving history is also aligning with the funder before. But oftentimes in a nonprofit, it's just one. It's just you. It's just you know, the grant writer or manager. So you have to do all of it yourself. So the biggest thing that I would say is keep a record. Like really, really be organized and diligent about your record, and find a way that you think. Find a system that works for you. So I said earlier, red, yellow, green. That's what I used to use. Every grant, and so I would have boards because I like to write old school then, and so I would have each service line, if you will,
Mhm.
education or housing or what have you, up on the board. And then when I saw a grant, I would read through it and think, okay, mission looks like it aligns in totality with the organization. Okay, now what program would be the better fit? And so then I
Mhm.
may be like, okay, this goes under the education umbrella. So I put those into those umbrellas. Then I go to, well, what is the due date? That's like the
Mhm.
first thing I actually, after that, what's the due date? Say the due date is December 1 or what have you,
Mhm.
and I'm looking at this in February. Okay, I know that I have a little bit of time. Usually you're not going to get that much time. You're going to get maybe 2 months or so.
Mhm.
But you put them in sequential order as well from the due date. And then again, like I said, you're always working backwards. And a
Mhm.
key with your proposals that will help you if you get flooded with a lot of
Mhm.
inquiry is that oftentimes with your proposals, each funder is asking for similar
Mhm.
information. So you're
Mhm.
usually going to be asked for your 501c3. You're usually going to be asked for what your mission statement is. You're going to
Mhm.
be asked for maybe the history of the organization.
Mhm.
So all of those things keep in I want to say a bucket, but keep in a folder that is your go-to folder that you don't have to look at it a lot except when it gets updated. So when the company
Mhm.
updates, when your organization updates your 501c3, you get a new copy, you put it in there. When your organization updates its board list, you get a new copy, you put it in there. And that's usually around, certain times for your 501c3 or the end or the beginning of your organization's fiscal year. Every time I had a great working relationship with in my nonprofits with our CEOs so that
Mhm.
when a new budget came out or new audited financials, hey, can I have a copy of that? Because they always knew that I needed it. Boom, put it in the folder. It helped them too, because then I didn't have to go and harass them every time that
Right.
I had a grant. I didn't have to knock on their door for it. I already had it in my folder. So when you have your set of information that really doesn't change within the year, then it's a lot easier for you to fill in those spaces for each proposal that needs you to tailor it a little differently depending on what you're writing about. But the goal isn't to reinvent the wheel with every proposal, particularly
Mhm.
when it's high proposal season. If you want to drum out a lot of proposals, it's careful consideration for each one of them, of course, but a lot of those documents are things that you have to continue to supply. And then when you're doing that, you can work on the data or the information for the more specific details and the specific questions that you have. And you can also have that time. I always used to give, if I had a proposal where there was someone that was working in the organization that needed to provide data or information, I'd give them some time as well too, because I'd have to acknowledge like, it's like your emergency is not my
Mhm.
emergency. So if
Mhm.
I have a deadline, that's my deadline. And of course, if they're like, we need funding for this project, hopefully they're in it too. But if they're
Mhm.
also working in the field or working with other
Yeah.
people, they're going to have priorities too. So
Mhm.
I want to be able to respect their deadlines and their time. So I may give them a few weeks if I have it, and let them know like, hey, I do need this information and I need it by here. And I'm here maybe like a week before I actually need it, but it gives
Uh-huh.
everybody some time so that once again, you're not running up on deadlines and what have you, especially when you have a lot of proposals going on simultaneously.
Love it. Okay, I'm gonna go over to the chat box really quick. If you have any questions, please add those. Go ahead and drop those questions, and we will read them out. We have Imani Penn says, "Hi, Professor White Jones."
Hi, Imani.
We have Elizabeth said, "I'm here." Hi, Elizabeth.
Hello,
Tanisha,
Elizabeth.
good morning, Tanisha.
Good morning. Good morning.
Awesome. Man, this is some amazing information. So there are, I know there's organizations tuning in where they are the executive director, they're the grant writer, they're the marketer, they're wearing all of these hats. What recommendations would you have for them when it comes to the grant writing process? So like, what would you recommend for them if they're the ones doing it alone? How can they get out that area of doing it alone? Any tips that you have for those tuning in that's like, oh yeah, I'm doing all of this.
But yes, so the first thing is that when you can get out from it, when you have the ability to hire a grant writer, certainly do so, just because that takes a lot of time, especially if you are the executive director and you're the CFO. It just takes a lot of time off of your plate
Hmm.
with that. There, if you do have time, seek out any of your local um, organizations. There are some. I'm trying to think of both. Of course, we know that there's the UCF. UCF has our nonprofit management program and certificate as well. So you can go and get degrees and certificates. But also, if it is cost prohibitive, there are some wonderful books that are out there that can talk about the grant writing process. There's some authors that a lot of times will put different tips and tricks on, to Google if you have that. So I would say whatever your resource allows you to get extra training, be able to do that. The biggest thing I think always with nonprofit management is organization. And I think that's always counter to what we have to do, because there's so much that needs to get done, and
Hmm.
we become the president, the CEO, the CFO, the grant writer, the volunteer coordinator, and then there's the actual program itself, like the
Right.
thing that we're trying to get everybody to see. So you have to acknowledge that, number one, you can't do everything at once and you can't do it all in one day. And so if there is, out of a week, you may have to take some time and say, today, barring any emergency, today is my grant day. Today is just the
Hmm.
day that I take a few hours. It doesn't have to be all day either. You may just go and say, all right, let me do some prospect research. Let me just dedicate 3 or 4 hours, half of my day, to prospect research.
Hmm.
And then I've got like just a couple of, my goal might be, let me just get 2 or 3 prospective grant opportunities, or call people to see if there's a connection there regarding sending out a proposal, or getting them to just getting to know me and getting to know my organization. And just set aside, be intentional about your time. Don't feel that you have to be like, oh, well, I got to spend a whole week doing XYZ, unless, again, it's an emergency, or if there's a due date that's coming up for like your 501(c)(3 or your audited
Hmm.
financials, the IRS. By all means, take that time that you need to do those things. But in as far as like with grant writing and doing it, alone, it really is about the timing and the intentionality. So if you
Hmm.
just take, blocking off your schedule for, say, here's 4 hours that I'm going to commit to prospect research, or here's 4 hours I'm going to commit to training, that then will just help you take that apple and bite off those small chunks. Because I think sometimes as grant officers, we want to take the whole chunk and we want to do everything all at once.
Hmm.
See if there's volunteers as well. There are a lot of grant writers who are retired, who may do pro bono work, who are like, well, um, I don't write as much as I used to, but I'll be happy to help up and coming nonprofit professionals that don't have as much experience by handling that. UCF has a great program that we do with our experiential learning, where you contact our experiential learning coordinator. They will basically ask you a few questions, but then you'll be put on a list for our service learning courses. And the service learning is an opportunity for our students to engage with people outside of the classroom with real life opportunities. And so I teach several service learning courses, but in the grant sphere, I teach 2 of them for 2 programs. And so our students will go reach out to a nonprofit or an NGO organization and that needs grant writing, and they will prepare a grant proposal as outlined in my class from start to finish. We talk about finding funding, we talk about the different areas of grant writing. Also, that at the end of the semester, a proposal is now written that the nonprofit can then submit to the funding source of their choice. And that, again, that's a free service. That's nothing that you have to pay for. And these are students, they're getting experience as well. So they're working really hard. These are master's degree students who are very talented, hardworking people who want the best and want to put out the best quality work as well. So those are options that you have if you're outside of Orlando, the Orlando area. See if there's anyone who, again, has volunteer. Your local community foundation may have people also that can volunteer to help with grant writing. But always seek help and see if you can find somebody to help so that you're not doing all of that work all the time.
Love it. So I saw a slew of questions come in, so I'm gonna go over to the chat box. All right.
Yay!
So Elizabeth says, "I'm from Nigeria. What document is equivalent to the 501c3? Would my organization be able to apply for grants that are U.S. based? How do I find grants, international grants?"
That's a really good question. So I don't know the specific requirement for or equivalent for Nigeria as far as the 501c3, but it's essentially whatever the document is that states that you are a nonprofit or a private entity, that you're not making that you're not set up to receive funds for private purposes, but that you're using them for a public purpose. So whatever the equivalent that is for you or for your country, that's a document that you may need. And some places outside of the US may not require it. So always check your municipality, your country, your area to make sure that your documents are aligned with where your funding sources may be with that. Now, in the US, how to get any sort of international grants. So there's a lot, there's formal ways. There are programs like Foundation Directory online that has a slew of different programs, both domestically and internationally, that you can receive different funding sources. There's a free version, and then there's a paid version as well. There's Candid now, which kind of is that same realm. They've merged and what have you. There was Grant Station, and then there's what I like to say, good old Google. And I'll tell you why Google is really good and why I have used it a lot. Someone told me when I was a novice-ish, when I was early career, I should say, in nonprofit, that one of the secrets to finding grants is to look at the things that you use. Because a lot of times companies and corporations will have funding dollars set aside for public purposes or what have you. And they need to give that money away for tax purposes as well. So always ask and see, like, okay, if I really am using gas, let's say we have a gas station called Wawa here that's all over Florida, and they have a foundation, and they usually give a lot to organizations that they have put Wawas in, or to areas, I should say, that they've put Wawas in. So Florida, Orlando, Florida, they're going to give a lot to different Orlando-based organizations. So if there is a product or a company that you use banks are really good. Financial institutions are excellent when it comes to giving away money, or having foundations and other social enterprise blocks for funding. Grocery stores. It could be, a lot of in the United States, Fortune 500 companies or global, 500 companies that make products that you're like, ordinarily you're like, oh, well, this is just a soap company, but that soap company has a giving or a foundation arm that you may not have even thought about until you're like, oh, well, let me see if Sony does this. Let me see if Apple does this. Let me see, who does this. And then you end up going down this rabbit hole of just searching for the foundation and the funding arms and legs of these companies that you really didn't even think were giving dollars away. But that, from like a global perspective, that's ways that I usually used to kind of dig into and see like what is popular in which area. And I definitely would use that power of like seeing like what is going on in the United States that, may be helpful for me to, write for, or what have you. And what are the, US requirements, or, what are the requirements of countries outside of the US? And a lot of times you can Google that and just ask for it. And a lot of those details will pop up for each country and municipality about what is required, what are the documents, and what is equivalent to your country as well. But I was trying to look at that. That's a really good question too. So I'm going to do a little bit of additional research. And if I come up with any new things, then I'll certainly reach out to like Lashina to share those.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. So the next question is from Imani. She says, currently working with a new nonprofit. This is their second year as a grant writer. What are some advice for best practices as they build finance team? Currently, there is a treasurer, grant writer, and fundraiser, so that we can work together, since we are volunteering our services and we are currently building a system for the future and new individuals coming in.
Okay. I think that one, you're already on a good track because you've got a good team, you've got a treasurer and a grant writer, you've got people in place. So I think you're already ahead or where you should be. I think that where you need to concentrate or continue to concentrate is develop a strategic plan with timelines. So anytime when you are starting or when you're newer to an organization, like I said earlier, having a strategic plan and a direction of where you want to be, and then putting timelines associated with that is going to be critical, because it's going to hold you accountable as well as to meeting those deadlines or approaching activities that will enable you to meet those particular deadlines. So if you want to say, we want to make sure that we have our folder of information, your 501c3s, your audits, your mission statements, your history, all of that, your budget. If you say, I want all of our folders to be at least in a good place within a year, by our next fiscal year, we're going to have all of this documentation in there. Then you have that and you have a goal. Then maybe your other goal is, we want to put together a budget review committee. Because if you want to make sure that you do have audited financials, because most of the time with grants, especially some of the larger ones, you're going to need at least 2 years worth of audited financial statements, and external audited financial statements. So do you have someone that might be another goal of getting an external organization to look at our finances and make sure that we have someone to audit our books. Another goal may be to put together a board committee that also is a finance committee. That's another kind of check and balance area. So I think that the three of you, Imani, can meet and really develop a strategic plan with timelines that have and feasible timelines as well. And it's okay if you run up against a timeline and you're not going to meet it. That's okay. It happens. you can move it, as long as we are all here, we can move the timeline. So as long as, and again, as long as things like the IRS, those critical things are not missed, but other deadlines you can maneuver, or just make sure that they are feasible and actionable, and you don't put them so close together where you feel overwhelmed. But get you all together in a room, maybe have a retreat if you haven't already, and nail out a strategic plan with timelines and with quantifiable expectations. You're going to have one financial statement, or you're going to have one auditor. Maybe it's just, we're going to interview 2 or 3 auditors. Maybe it's not even hire anyone yet. Maybe it's just, we're just going to find them to interview them and then go from there. But yeah, starting at a strategic plan would help.
Love it. And Elizabeth says, thank you so much, Professor. That was really helpful. So thank you. Thank you. I already know we have to have you come back on. Look. So once after this, we'll kind of look at if we can plan ahead and have you come back on. That would be absolutely awesome.
Yes.
And then Imani said thank you as well. So thank you so much. Is there anything else that you would like to share?
Well, I do have, if you want to keep up with me, if you're interested, I'm mostly on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place for like professional movement. So you can find me at Angela, I think it's Angela White Jones 1, but you can just type in my name, Angela White Jones. You'll see my picture, same picture that was on the promotional poster for this. So you'll see me, and you could type in like UCF, and usually I come up after that. And that's how you can get a lot of detailed information. Also, I'm on our UCF website for the School of Public Administration. You'll find me as faculty there. So that's where you can get all of the CV and all of that jazz. And my email address, if you would like, is angela.white-jones, Jones, at ucf.edu. So if you are interested in any of the programs that I have mentioned, our nonprofit management program, our research administration program, please certainly email me. I would love to be able to talk to you about those things, because we have really great programs and faculty and help for you in a variety of different capacities. And we have, in my opinion, we have a lot of fun. A lot of times people don't think like school can be, fun and interesting, but to me, that's one of the things I want to bring to it, is that not only are you getting practical work, but we're having a little bit of fun while you're there as well.
Yes, I agree. So I went through the program. I did my master's in nonprofit management. I did a certificate prior to then in nonprofit management. And I was sharing this with you earlier on. It was such a wonderful program. And the one of the parts that I really loved was the service learning component to it. So it's not only that we're learning in the classroom, but we were able to also apply. So almost every class had some sort of service learning component, whether it's developing a volunteer case study, or writing a grant for an organization, developing a strategic plan. I remember writing my first 100-page strategic plan thanks to UCF. Yes. I was like, what? It was for the Children's Home Society here. So yes, the classes are absolutely amazing. So you're not just learning it, but you're also applying what you're learning as well. Imani said we did have fun, especially in your class.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Yep.
That's good to hear. Good to hear.
Yes. Good time. So thank you so much. We definitely are going to have you back on if you are available.
Yes,
so
please. I can talk about this stuff. As you know, as you could probably see, I'm very enthusiastic about grants and grant writing and nonprofit management and all of those things. So I would love to be back on as well.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. So homework. So homework is to develop your strategic plan focused on the areas of grants, And go ahead and start planning out your 12-month calendar as to what grants are you going to apply for. We know that a lot of applications come back up around the same time every year, or you might have to research some of that. But go ahead and start planning out your calendar for the upcoming year so that you already know going into it, these are the grants that we're going after. And as Dr. Angela White-Jones shared, 80% preparation, 20% writing. So this is part of that preparation process.
Yes, absolutely. Prepare, prepare, prepare. That's where your key to success comes in. Definitely.
Yes, love it. Before we wrap up, I just want to make some final announcements and then we're gonna head out. So last week I told you all we had a wonderful time at the Blacks in Nonprofit Conference. This week on Friday, we'll be in Pinellas County with Pinellas County Urban League. You all are invited. You can go to our events page if you are in that area and want to come out. Please come out. Like I mentioned, Danita came out to her Jacksonville location when we were in Jacksonville. So please come out and join us. And also we'll be in Seminole County on Saturday. So you can find that on our event page that we just shared in the chat box. Check that out. And then also on our events page on November 2nd, we are partnering up with ACEs Matter to have awareness party. So definitely join us on November 2nd. More information again can be found on our events page. And before we close out, of course, I have to take a moment again to thank our sponsors for making these series possible at no cost to you all. So special thank you to this month's sponsor, Complex 7. Again, Complex 7 is an online BMW parts and apparel store. Check them out at www.complex7.com. So thank you once again, Dr. Angela White-Jones, for joining us. We definitely learned a lot and look forward to having you again on future Nonprofit Enthusiast Lives.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. All right. Bye, everyone.